Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me here. I'm really excited to be part of the High Impact Conference for Educators 2022. My name is David Pena. I'm originally from New Jersey, USA. Right now, I live in Mexico. I work as an EFL teacher, net tech coach. I'm a huge language enthusiast. I'm a big believer in education and education reform and harnessing the power of problem solving and creative thinking for our students in schools in a worldwide area. So thank you so much for having me. I'm really happy to be here. I'm going to actually be sharing with you guys my presentation titled "The Hidden Power of Podcasts." So I'm just excited to get started and show you what I have for you. So here we go. All right. So as I mentioned, my presentation is going to be based on podcasts, and I'm guessing many of you educators and people out there already know what a podcast is. Maybe some don't, but I'm going to help you out with that. It's really easy. However, there are some things that maybe as educators we did not realize in the past, or maybe we have overlooked when it comes to a podcast. So, how can they be, exploited in a very positive way within the classroom? Well, that's what I'm going to talk about today. And, hopefully you'll be able to take this, home and, just put it into practice in your classroom settings, in your schools. Maybe you can pass it along to other teachers as well. And, podcasts aren't just for, the music class or, the audio editing courses or, the kids who are in computer lab networks. No, we can virtually use podcasts for any subject that we have in school. So let's dive into it. All right. So a little bit about me. Well, my name is David Pena. I'm 30 years old. I've been involved in teaching with around 6+ years in education and language teaching. I'm originally from New Jersey, USA. I've lived, born and raised for many years. And afterwards, I now currently live in Mexico. I lived in Mexico City for some years. And after that, I moved to another place called Tlaxcala. It's a very nearby state. It's a very nice, beautiful place. It's very quiet. It's nice. It's a good place to live. No, it's not very urban. So I like places that are not mega cities. Um, as for myself, well, I started working as an EFL and ESL teacher over here in Mexico, teaching English to young students, to teenagers, to high school students, college grads, and adults, because they need it for wherever they're going, whether it be work or education. There are sectors that demand English. So I basically work with various age groups. Besides that, I'm also an active member of the Duolingo events team and Duolingo educators group. So I started with that around 2020. I began a little bit before the start of the pandemic. And I just, it's an interesting experience for me as an educator to see how things, turned out. I had a series of plans and events all laid out. And then during the pandemic, we had to do various changes. So, uh, you know, it could have looked, a bit bleak, but actually, because people were online most of the time, we were getting people from Brazil, from Colombia, from Israel, from Turkey, and it was just a wonderful experience to see people that I could never meet, physically or by going on a plane. But all of a sudden through the pandemic, one of the good things was that we could connect with people from other languages and cultures without having to travel, without having to buy a plane ticket. So besides that, I'm also the the Google Educator Group leader for the state of Tlaxcala. So I organize events. I'm a level 1 and level 2 Google Educator. I do a little bit of ed tech teaching, ed tech coaching for teachers, for students, for schools, mostly schools and teachers. But I'm quite active when it comes to ed tech. I'm all hands with that. I'm also part of the Wakelet Ambassador and Mode Ambassadors team. I'm also part of the Nat Geo Educator community, and as you might already know, I'm very active when it comes to education, student learning, and active metacognition throughout. So what do we have here? So the hidden power of podcasts, I'm basically going to divide it into 4 parts. The first part is called, what is a podcast and are they any good? Number 2, so how can I use them in class? Part three, can I make one for my class and my students? And number four, my final thoughts and key takeaways from this. So let's go podcasting for teachers, a quick and easy way to start including them in your classrooms and projects. So we're going to see how you guys can start implementing this. It's not the idea is here to be around maybe like 30 minutes because I don't think I should need an hour to explain the most important parts of this. I mean, if I can condense it in a nutshell for you guys to take, I'm pretty sure you guys work with nutshells a lot. And as teachers, we take that nutshell and we plant it, we make it grow, we make it expand. And I'm very confident that you guys in 30 minutes or less, give or take, will understand the most important points of this presentation, and how to start implementing them from day one. So what is a podcast, and are they any good? So for those of you who are not familiar with podcasts yet, to put it briefly, a podcast is a collection or a series of audio files that are in a digital format and are uploaded to the internet. So these individual files are commonly known as podcast episodes. The presenters can host news, topics of interest, any particular interests. They can have special guests, stories, narrations, comedy shows, whatever. So let's say it's basically like a digital radio. All right. So podcasts have many advantages. They can be played whenever you want. All right. You can share them quite easily with a link. All right. In case you missed something or you didn't understand what the person or the show was about or said, all you have to do is just with your finger, toggle back a little second or a minute or whatever you need. And you can fast forward, you can move back, you can put stop, you can put play, you can put pause. So it's something that is completely on demand for the user. I mean, you are in full control as to, the speed and how this is being played. So, I mean, that's a huge advantage, over, typical radio. Next, all right, so where can we start? Well, there are a bunch of places you can start with podcast. My personal favorite is the Google Podcast channel, where you can find many of them. You can also go to iTunes, the iPodcast from iTunes, from the Apple Store, SoundCloud. I guess probably like the number one famous and favorite of many people would be Spotify. We have Anchor, which is also used by many schools and labs. We have TuneIn, all right, Stitcher. So these are some of the most common platforms where you can actually find, podcast channels, and they're very easy to find, subscribe, listen to them, remove an episode if you don't want, or you can have a playlist so that you don't miss, what you want to listen to, maybe on a daily basis or whenever you have a set routine. So you can try, going on to some of these places, looking for your favorite channels, your favorite guests and hosts, and you should have some fun. Okay, let's dive into some of the facts about podcasts. Now, there are many of them, but I chose these three in particular because I think they're pertinent to educators, to school, and to the student community as well as family. So 59% of people who listen to podcasts do so while actually doing a housework or chore. So that's quite interesting, and we're going to get a little bit deeper into that in a few moments. All right, but I just want you to know that I'm around almost 60%. 59% of people are doing some sort of multitasking. All right, just it could be big, it could be small, but it doesn't require someone to actually be sitting still for 15, 30 minutes or 1 hour. They can be doing other activities as well while listening. Next, 74% of people who actually listen to podcasts or go to a podcast is because of the reason that they want to learn something new. They're interested in learning something that they did not know before. They want to add to their own personal knowledge. They want to increase on a personal level, and they go to podcasts to do this. So that's a good head start. That's indicating something special here. Next, 56% of podcast listeners are actually between the ages of 12 and 34. So this is quite interesting because, as we know, the typical school setting, well, we have, children from, younger than 12, but approximately 12 to 34 is just a good age, bracket here. We have our kids from middle school who are 12 years old approximately, or give or take. And, it goes up to 30s. So people who are maybe in a postgraduate, or people who have just graduated from university or college and are working, maybe their first or second year of work after they have left school. So as you can see, it's 56% of these people are active listeners. So that's something noteworthy. All right, so part two. So how can I use them in my classroom? So, well, if you look, if you take a look at the main source, like, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, the ones we just mentioned, TuneIn and others, you will find tons of channels that you can select from. I mean, you can find channels from arts and crafts for, for children who are in kindergarten, to quantum mechanics, all right, to gardening. So there's a channel for basically anything that you would ever think about or wonder. I'm pretty sure you can find a podcast channel that is exclusive to that particular topic of interest. So the good news is for teachers that there is also safe and reliable content out there that is that we can share it with our students. We can share it with our co-teachers, with our friends, with our family, with people who we interact in on school, with superintendents, with the principal, with the vice principal. I mean, there are different channels out there that are worth listening to, are worth sharing. So why not? For example, if you like teaching French, okay, and here's where we get to the implementation part. Well, you can ask your students to listen to a particular episode about verb conjugation, all right, and assign it to them, all right. So I don't know. I guess there are some educators out there who already very familiarized with this, who assign maybe on a weekly basis or on the basis that they consider an episode or something of that sort. Maybe some of you have never assigned a podcast episode because maybe you haven't heard of it, never crossed your mind. But let's give it a try. So, did you know? Okay, so this is interesting. As I mentioned before, yes, all you have to do is just share or copy the link share, okay, for the particular episode, and they are very compatible, okay, with many of the LMS that are here, such as Google Classroom, Canva, Blackboard Learn, Quizlet, Edmodo, and many others. I mean, if you have the link, you can virtually share it anywhere and with anyone you want. All right, and it just makes it so much easier for us teachers to just copy the link and paste it so that all of our students can have access to the same file, and they're not saying, oh, I missed it, or where can I find it. Well, we can centralize it in a way and make sure everybody is going to the place where we want them to go to find the material that we are posting. Next comes the integration part. All right, so let's take a look. Language classes. So if you assign students to listen to a particular lesson that focuses on a story, it can also focus on pronunciation, grammar, or it can even work as a fluency checkup. I mean, there are many language channels out there. So if you're a French teacher, you can definitely use this. If you're a Spanish teacher, if you're teaching German, okay, if you're teaching English to people who don't speak English as a first language. I mean, this is a really cool tip for you guys out there. This is really important because active listening is something that we want in all of our learners, right? And we want to make sure that they're paying attention to pronunciation, that they're paying attention to the way we intonate words, to the speed. All right, we want them to sound as natural as possible in their second language or third language if they're going for a third. So it comes really handy for language classes and for students out there because they can listen to someone else than their teacher or their professor. Not that it's a bad idea to listen to them. What I mean is they can listen to another source and kind of make a contrast and keep adding to that potential value. Next, as rephrasing of the lesson. So okay, it's no secret that after some time, students get used to our voice. They get used to our way of teaching, used to the way we, go about our classes on a day-to-day basis, right? I know some teachers, and are very spontaneous. Some of you are very creative, and you don't like, falling into routine. And I really admire that. And it's, that's to be commended because, we as educators should not be, predictable to our students. We want our students to be, on their feet, on their toes, wondering, what the teacher's going to do next, and have them, with a smile, expecting something positive from us, and looking forward to the next day of class with a smile, and not the other way around. Right. So if you taught a lesson, maybe it was on history, the Battle of 1812. Maybe it had to do with chemistry. Um, the composition of carbon. Well, you can go online, take a look at a channel that broadcasts the topic that you teach, and select a particular episode, and assign it to your students, right? So going back to the history lesson, the Battle of 1812. Let's say you find an episode, you find a channel, you find a particular episode that talks about it. You listen to it first. You like what you hear. Share it with your students. Right? They'll be interested in listening to the same topic, the same center of the material that you just gave them. All right, and maybe through the eyes of another person, or through the voice of a different agent, in this case. So it comes really handy when it comes to rephrasing the way the teacher portrayed the lesson that day. They can have a different point of view and add it to their own student toolbox. Next, metacognition. So when students are tasked to find the purpose, in what they're learning, new neural connections form. All right. Now, I don't mean to get all brain surgeon on you guys over here, but it is important that as teachers we also understand neural connections, and making sure that we are helping our students develop learning in the long term and not in the short term, right? So this comes into play, all right, because we make our students also develop different ways to look at the same topic or the same lesson or a point of view, but actually multiplying it by various forms. All right. So if they can also take charge of their own personal learning, right, and see, well, this is what the teacher said, this is a lesson, but I kind of have some questions, or I feel like there's might be a small gap, or something was just not clear to me. Well, let them go online, let them find something, that can prove useful to them, all right, and give them that ability to seek that purpose in what they're learning, and go to a podcast, listen to an episode, see if I learned this episode mentions something in particular that I missed in class, or my teacher did mention that, but I just didn't understand it, and now I have a different way of of viewing it or understanding it with with this episode, how the guest, or the host, I'm sorry, presented the material. I mean, that's a huge plus for us educators. So when students have that, are commanded to find that purpose, why are they learning this? Is it going to work? Am I going to use this in 5 years from now? Is it any useful for me? Well, this comes into play, right? And when students are, are looking to really have a decent idea of what they're, a decent knowledge, right, of what they're having every day in school, right? It comes into the long term. It plays into the long-term memory and not just the short. Finally, as a homework assignment, right? So when was the last time you assigned a podcast, right? If you haven't done it before, give it a try. As we mentioned, it can go from arts and crafts to music to gardening to how to cook ramen, right, to quantum mechanics. Okay, so your students might find it odd at first, maybe because if you've never done it, it's quite new to them. Okay, but I'm pretty sure, and I can almost guarantee that they're going to also love this kind of experience, and they'll be interested, in going deeper. Some of them might even say, you know what, you assigned this episode, but I also kind of found this in this other episode, and I also just decided to listen to all three of them, and I just enjoyed your class so much more. Yeah, so why not? So now let's take a look. Now some of these I basically divided into two. Okay, so on the left you can see recommendable for students. All right, so these are some of the channels that I personally enjoy and that touch upon different topics for students, for schools, such as stuff you should know, Duolingo Spanish. There's also French and English. All right, the history of the world in 100 objects, Star Talk with Neil deGrasse Tyson. We have TED Talks Daily, You're Not So Smart. All right, Curiosity Daily, one of my favorites. Learn German, German Pod 101. So I'm practicing German myself, but you can basically substitute Learn German for Learn Spanish, Learn Portuguese Pod 101, Learn Japanese Pod 101. So take a look. There are a bunch of languages out there in case for you language teachers and language coaches. Um, you're going to have a good time. You're going to be thrilled by all of the the variety that you can find online. So these are just some of my recommendations for your classroom, for students. Of course, they're podcasts for different ages. So just go online, surf the web, have fun. Now for teachers on the right, okay. Now these are some of my personal favorite. Okay, we have Ed Webcasts. All right, Educating All Learners Alliance, the Classroom Exit Strategies podcast channel. We have the Teacher Talk Radio, the Google Teacher Podcast, the Creative Classroom with John Spencer, the House of Ed Tech, and there's just so many more that you can, take a look at. And they have great guests. There are different influencers in the ed tech world. We're talking, Alice Keeler, Matt Miller, Michael Sawash, Casey Bell. There are just so many, Monica Burns. I mean, there's just so many influencers out there that are really, doing a positive change in the world of education. They have very interesting podcast channels that you can find almost on your favorite platform, whether it be Google, Apple, Spotify, TuneIn. You're most likely are going to find them. And my recommendation is, take a look at them. All you need to do is your smartphone and your earphones, and you're good to go. That's all you need. You don't really need any more material than that. Next. So we understood the part of, okay, so yeah, I know how to find the podcast. I know how to assign them. I can share them. I know how to, just, ask my students to, start working with them. But, hey, David, can I make my own podcast now? Can I do this with my students? Can I have a personal experience with them? The answer is yes. Okay. So part 3 is about how can I make my own podcast channel? So the answer is yes, you can. If you have a microphone, or if you just have a smartphone, you're good to go. That's really all that you need. Of course, there is professional equipment that you can buy out there, but if you don't have it, don't worry. A smartphone will do. So there are several ways you can go about this. Okay. Now, for those of you educators out there in schools who are worried that you guys need platforms that are COPA, FERPA, and GDPR enabled or trusted or validated, you can trust Flipgrid. All right. So Flipgrid is mostly known for being a video response platform where teachers can record themselves, asking a particular assignment or showcasing something, and students can also submit a response in video format. Now, can this be transferred into a podcast? Yes. Just simply turn off the camera, right? And it'll record basically like an audio, right? And the fun thing is you can also add stickers to this. You can edit them. There are just so many cool features that Flipgrid offers, and they keep innovating. They keep having updates that make us educators really happy. And we're just so glad to see companies like Flipgrid and others investing in their product and making sure it's safe for children, safe for families. It's very educational friendly and school friendly. And what else can you ask? So yeah, if you want a platform that it has all of these certification and protections, Flipgrid is your tool there. All right. So you can have fun. You can assign students, maybe 3-minute videos and just, camera off, or 2-minute, or whatever you would like. You're the teacher. Feel free to use your own creativity here, and make the students participate. It's going to get really interesting, and you can put them into teams, and collaboration is just wonderful. Now, if you're willing to try another alternative or something a little bit different, or maybe you have students who are 18 and over, okay, so you can try Anchor, Podbean, Soundtrap. So these are some of the most popular platforms besides Flipgrid, all right, where you can actually do podcasts in a more maybe podcast oriented way, right? While Flipgrid is more video, these other 3 that I just mentioned are exclusively for basically podcasting services only, all right? So give them a try. Anchor is really interesting. It's very common for students, for beginners. It's very beginner friendly, right? In the case of Podbean is also very easy to use and to implement. Once you have episodes, you can actually give it permission to distribute it on Google Podcast, Apple, Stitcher, Spotify, and just grow your audience if that's also what you're interested. You can feel free to share this with colleagues, with other teachers, with the students' family members, and so on. All right. So give them a try. There are different ways you can go about this. Like I said, I guess Anchor is very popular because it's very beginner friendly. Soundtrap might be a little bit more advanced. They have their free version, and there's a pay version. You can try them both. Same, I believe the same goes with Podbean. But the point is, doing some pioneering there and having fun as during the way. So we come to the next part here. So, did you know that? All right. So, students don't have to be at their desks or sitting. All right. Now, well, you normally give them an assignment, whether it be to watch a YouTube video or to, maybe write 2 or 3 pages on something in particular or to do a map. These kinds of activities do require students to be, in front of a computer, in front of their laptop, or, in front of their notebook or something. Okay. Which is not bad. I'm not against that. However, I'm here to tell you the advantages of podcasts. So they don't have to be, sitting, right, or standing still, right? So students have also their, their own level of busyness in their lives, and by assigning podcast episodes on any LMS or through the ways that you assign them, all right, we can actually enable our students to do, to listen to the assignment while practically doing something else. They can be washing dishes and listening to the homework. They can be walking the dog and paying attention to what you asked them to in the episode, right? So I know maybe some of you are against multitasking. I myself do not like when it's a very broad multitasking, but I do believe that a lot of people are listening to music almost every day. Many of our students, they come to class with their headphones, their Apple Pods or whatever. I mean, sometimes, I mean, you think that they're listening to you, and then they turn around and they have one of these things on their ear. Um, so I mean, they're already listening to basically music or the radio almost all the time. So why not assign them something that is easy for them to just do. All right. And like I said, I mean, they can very well be washing the dishes or doing some particular chore around the house, and they can enjoy the podcast. Next, the Feynman technique, which is my favorite. So this comes into play when making a podcast. So, as the famous Richard Feynman once stated, if you study something and learn it, okay, and afterwards you truly want to see if you indeed understood what was being taught to you, the good way to prove this, or to put this theory to word, or put this to the test, I'm sorry, is by actually teaching someone else. If you can transmit what you learned and teach it to the other person, and the other person understands the way that you taught and understands the topic that you brought to this person, then indeed you have honestly learned. But if you just learn something and then you try to replicate it to another person, and the other person did not understand what you learned, then we need to go back and do some changes there. All right. So how does that work into podcasts? Well, the point is, when you assign students, okay, guys, maybe it can be a class on, I don't know, carbon, the molecular structure of carbon. All right. So, you have Jane and Johnny and, in the classroom. So you ask them, hey, any questions? Students will most likely say no. Okay. So if you don't have any questions, all right, I want you to come up with a podcast episode. You can write a script. All right. And what I want you to do is present it to the class, and you're going to answer your classmates' questions. Now, this obviously might come to a shock to many of our students, but it's actually what I would say, it's a very positive shock, right? Because the students no longer are in a passive mode, but now they come to the realization that, oh no, now I'm on the other side of the desk. Now I'm going to have to teach. Now I'm going to have to, listen to my classmates, pretend I'm the teacher, and I'm going to have to answer their questions. So this puts the brain into, a huge, well, I would just say in a different responsibility mode, and it starts activating, any gaps or any questions that they might have, where they're like, wait a minute, if I have this question, probably, my classmates have this question as well. So, I want to make sure I can answer them. So it's a neat little trick that I've personally tried myself. I actually tried this with some of my students. I do remember a class I was actually teaching on English verbs, and I asked them, okay, any questions? And they all said no. I'm very sure you guys can relate. And I said, oh, all right, so let's pretend I'm the student. I was absent yesterday. I'm not really sure about verbs, so I'm going to ask you guys questions. And some of my students, their face became, maybe a little bit red. Some became a little bit pale. and they never expected, that, kind of switch. So I started asking questions. I, pretended, what, I was absent yesterday. I don't know how this works. Can you please explain? And all of a sudden, students, started realizing, wait a minute, I understood what the teacher said, but when it comes to teaching others, I have a problem, or it's just different. And that's right. I mean, it is. Um, and that's where true learning comes into play, right? Because if you are able to actually retain and then transmit to another person and have that other person understand the lesson that you also learned yourself, it's a remarkable work, and that's actually true education right there. Next, optimize input of point of view and other resources. So students, without even realizing it, will be able to enjoy lessons more because they're reviewing material outside the classroom. And it's not that they're, listening to the teacher repeat what was said in the class. It's actually, they're having a different person, a different agent, a different presenter showcasing, the lesson or the material or the topic that was seen in class. Most often as well, you will find that there is, an extra input. You mentioned something that the podcast didn't, and the podcast mentioned something that you probably didn't in class. Now, is that at fault? Is that the teacher's fault? No, not at all. But the point is, the topics can be so broad that it is almost impossible to expect a teacher to cover every single point. All right. So if we can help ourselves through, through a podcast that is quite useful and quite constructive when it comes to teaching, then this is also just a good tool for us to have and to share with our students, right? Not only will they, be engaged because it's not that they're not listening to their teacher again, or for the second time during the day. They're actually listening to someone else who they don't know, all right, and they're interested in what they have to say. All right, they're interested in what they're explaining, the way they're explaining, and that's actually might even provide or make more questions to the student that he or she can then come to class and say, hey, I listened to this particular podcast, Mr. or Mrs., last name of the teacher. I listened to this, they mentioned this. I was curious, do you have an answer about this? Can we talk about it in class? And we really want that engagement from our students, right? So why not? Okay, so let's review. So they're very useful for language classes and when it comes to pronunciation coaching. Students listen to different presenters, besides the teacher and the teacher's voice. As I said, they get used to the teacher's voice, right? So we don't want them to fall into a routine, or we don't want to be predictable to our students. We want them to be engaged. We want them to listen to other sources as well that do not enter into conflict with what we're teaching, but we do want them to have critical and creative thinking. Next, so you and your students can actually start making podcasts, whether they be private or public, you can decide. And you don't need a big budget. You can just start with a simple smartphone. In the case of Flipgrid, Spot, Anchor, and others, there are also app versions that you can use. You can download them to your smartphone, and presto, you can start building your own podcast. Also, it doesn't require students to be sitting, all right, at their desks, or to be in front of a computer or in front of a laptop, all right. They can be doing other things while listening to the assignment. Next, it provides input, viewpoints, and insight that that is useful, that might be useful, and was not touched upon during class, right? Because there's just so much a teacher can cover that, as I mentioned before, it would be really unfair to expect a teacher to cover every single detail of a particular point of history, or in chemistry class, or whatever, archaeology, astronomy, etc. Finally, it encourages active listening, creativity, and thinking outside of the box. Now, how does that come into play? Well, students are listening to this particular lesson. They can either fast forward, they can put pause, okay? They can go back, all right? If something wasn't clear, they might even look for another episode themselves and, add and make sure it contributes to what is being taught in the class, okay? So when students start taking command of their own learning and they're actually actively doing it without you telling them, that's what really makes our day, makes us smile, makes us happy as educators. Now, this is something that I did, and I will provide this freebie for all of you. So this is just a little, printable I made out for all of you teachers out there. Okay, so you can print this out in, legal paper, 8.5 by 11 inches. So we have here the big picture. Students can actually take notes, like what's the main idea of this podcast? What am I supposed to learn? What is this for? All right. You have the name, the date, the podcast channel, the number of the episode. Feel free to modify that as you wish if need so. Um, three key points or takeaways. Now, why did I put three? Well, to be honest, a lot of the times when we ask people to memorize things or to take something home with them, normally most people can hang on to three. All right. Some of them might hang on to more if they have a good memory. But the average person tends to remember three things. All right. Whether three takeaways, key points, three activities, three quotes, three inspirational ideas. Right. So work with the number three here. Right. You want your students to take three key points or takeaways that are important to them that they listen to in the podcast. All right. Then we have like a picture of a maybe like smartphone, and it says interesting facts and notes. Students can actually write interesting things that they found throughout the episode here, right? um, Give the rating. What would you rate the episode? Okay, so that'd be interesting feedback to see from students. How would they rate it? Was it 1 star for them? Was it 2? Maybe for a student it was 5. Maybe for another student that episode was a 3, right? Because it didn't actually portray the voices of the other people in the story. So finally, we have our goals section. So what you learned plus stuff that was not mentioned in class. All right. So again, is this to make the teacher look bad? No. What we want is actually the student to say, hey, the teacher mentioned this, and the podcast also mentioned this, and I just think that they are in agreement. I think that they can contribute one to the other, and overall it just feeds into the knowledge that we're having here, and it just makes a more enriched experience. All right. So you want to make sure that students are also not only actively listening, but also putting this on paper, because it's still very valid. I know some of us we don't use paper and pen anymore. We use keyboards, right? But I still think that taking personal notes, writing, okay, is still much more effective than plain typing. And actually, there are studies and research that do prove this. So if you like what you saw here today, if you like this printable, you can download it for yourself, make edits to it if you want, or just leave it as it is, print it out and hand it out to your students, or just have it as a PDF file or editable file. You guys can get creative however you want. Okay, so my final thoughts here. So no matter what subject you teach or the name of your class, I'm pretty sure that this tool can be implemented therein. So, let's think about it. Our students normally come to class, they hear us maybe, 5 times a week, or maybe 3, or maybe once. We don't know. It depends on, the class and the schedule. All right. But either way, I'm pretty sure that, we have some sort of relationship or encounter with student, like maybe on a weekly basis or almost daily basis. All right. So after a while, they might get used to us. And that's when creativity starts to kind of disappear, because then routines comes into play, and when routine comes into play, then thinking outside the box becomes something in the back burner, right? Something that's not present, something somewhere in the closet. So all right, we want active thinking, we want active listening, we want our students to be thinking outside the box. And we can also ask ourselves as teachers and educators, what is something that can cause an honest engagement and sincere interest that I have not assigned before? All right, so give it a try. Okay, so whether or not it comes as to a surprise to our students, innovation should always be part of the teacher toolkit, right? So we have to push ourselves to continuously think outside the box. As I mentioned before, I think one of creativity's biggest enemies is routine, right? Because routine can really stifle a lot of things in our lives, right? And the more you practice problem solving, the more you practice critical thinking, the more you actually do thinking outside the box, I mean, solutions will come up, right? Not only for school or college, but in life itself. Life is just a huge equation of just problem solving every day, whether it be big, whether it be small. That's a skill that I believe everybody should harness, because it's very useful in relationships and math and science, at work, with colleagues. This problem solving is really key to a lot of things. Okay. I'm also going to show this quote from a famous podcaster. Many of you might have also known or heard about him. His name is Joe Rogan. Okay, so very famous guy on podcasts. And he says the following: the beautiful thing about podcasting is it's just talking. It can be funny. It can be terrifying. It can be sweet. It can be obnoxious. It almost has no derivative form. In that sense, it's one of the best ways to explore an idea, and certainly much less limiting than trying to express the same idea in stand up comedy. For some ideas, stand up is best, but it's really, really nice to have podcasts as well. All right. So, teachers, educators, all of you guys out there, give it a try. Like I said, if you only have a smartphone, you have a good head start. All right. You don't need fancy equipment like, what we have here in the picture. Now, if you have that at home, or if you're planning to buy that, or your school has it, hey, I mean, what's there to lose? I mean, you already have the equipment, right? I mean, all that's left is the will. So, but if not, I mean, a simple smartphone can do. All right. And creativity knows no limits, right? I mean, improvement knows no limits. It's one of my favorite quotes. Okay. So, my sincere congratulations to many of the educators out here today watching this. I know the last couple of years have been quite hard on many of us because we have had to transition. Some of us have seen our students, graduate virtually. We wanted to hug them. We wanted to really just in person tell them how much we miss them, how much we really like them, and we enjoyed giving them class. And we had to do it through a webcam, or we had to do it through a screen. You know, so some of us lost family members to COVID. Some of us went through different kinds of hardships. you know um, to some this was quite new. They'd never taught before, and now they have a brilliant platform. Now they're very much engaged in everything that has to do with ed tech. So I know it's been hard these last couple of years, but I'm pretty sure that distance learning and online learning is here to stay, is here to improve, is here to really get better for present and future generations. There are so many advantages to the online learning platforms, community, people who are actively participating on online learning and distance learning, and making sure that the internet is not only for entertainment or business, but also for education and for reaching communities that are truly in need of of high quality education, and that they can have a brilliant and wonderful experience in different ways. So to all you educators out there, thank you so much for not giving up. Thank you so much for continuing, for being an inspiration to your fellow students, to fellow colleagues, to teachers. um, you guys have been doing, and we've all been doing a wonderful job, helping people throughout, amidst the pandemic, throughout amidst circumstances of any sort. Teachers are really important. We do a lot of things. We're responsible for making sure that future generations are coming out prepared, are coming out with the skills that they really need, that we can impact their lives, and that maybe 10 or 15, 20 years after they're graduated, we can still get emails or phone calls from them saying, hey, I haven't forgot about you. You've been a great inspiration to me. I'm in this college, or I'm working at this place now. I'm working my dream job because you didn't give up on me, because you actually did something different, because you actually went above and beyond what was expected, because you actually did show that you really cared about me when I was in class, and when I was sleeping. You would make sure that I would be an active participant, and not just succumb to whatever I was going through. So many of you have experienced that yourselves. I know pretty much myself have also seen students who, after a couple of years, they still, call me, they still send me messages saying, thank you so much, inviting me to see their work, inviting me to see where they are now. And it's just a brilliant, such a wonderful experience that, we really get to have. So best wishes to all you educators. Thank you so much for staying with me. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to reach out. My email is there, so is my phone number, and I wish you all the very best, right? I like questions. If you have any questions, keep them coming. You can, we can chat, I can respond. And it just, it's just a wonderful experience when teachers, get together and collaborate for the betterment, the improvement of so many things. Thank you guys. Take care. Best wishes to all of you. Stay safe, and thank you so much for having me once again here at the High Impact Conference for Educators 2022. All right. Take care, everybody.